There are some wounds that do not heal with time, they only sink deeper. And sometimes the shadow of the past falls over the present, and you can't get rid of it. What happened that night changed the course of my life. Now I feel that there is a gap between the old me and the present me. Those false memories of me and my dog Dobe still haunt me with deep shame. But this story is not just about regrets, because Tom came into my life and changed everything. Maybe love gives you a second chance, but I have to tell you how it all started. When I was 21 years old, I was still carrying the burden of my past traumas caused by my father since childhood that had crept into every corner of my life. My father was a harsh man who kept me on my toes with his very presence, let alone his love. In fact, he put me through so much back then that he can't even look at me today. I can't forget those nights as a child, but that's a topic for another video. My mother, on the other hand, was usually silent, ignoring me as she was crushed by my father's dominant character. Over the years, this feeling of loneliness grew inside me. When I started university, I hoped things would change, but things didn't work out the way I wanted. Although I had a friend like Maya, our ties were almost completely severed after my betrayal of her. I was lost in the suffocating darkness of loneliness. One day, I had a moment when the loneliness became unbearable. I had just returned from classes. I closed the door to my room, and as I stared at the blank walls, I suddenly felt a deep emptiness inside. I couldn't communicate with people, I couldn't rekindle old friendships. I was constantly living in the shadows of the past. I had to find a solution to this. Suddenly, an idea came to my mind. A friend. Yes, I needed a friend who would be unconditionally loyal to my life. That day, I decided to adopt a dog. The next day, I started researching local shelters on the internet. Among dozens of dogs, one immediately caught my attention. A short-haired, powerfully built Doberman, with big brown eyes staring at the screen. I named him Dobe, called the shelter, and went there early the next morning. When I arrived at the shelter, I felt that Dobe was different from the other dogs. From the first moment I saw him, there was an attraction between us. While other dogs were barking and trying to attract attention, he stood silently and kept his eyes on me. Words cannot describe the depth of meaning in his eyes. When the shelter worker took him out of his cage, Dobe came softly to me and put his head on my knee. At that moment, my eyes filled with tears, because for the first time in my life, I felt that a being trusted me so much. I took a taxi home from the shelter. In the car, Dobe was sitting in the back seat. Every now and then, he would turn and look at me, then lean his head against the window and look outside. An involuntary smile appeared in my eyes. It was as if I was no longer alone, if only everything had been so innocent. In the first days, Dobe and I went through an adjustment period. When I brought him to my house, he sniffed every corner and tried to adapt to his new environment. I had prepared a little corner for him with a soft bed, some toys, and a food bowl, but he preferred to stay close to where I was. At night, he usually slept in his own bed, but a few times I noticed that he would come to my bed at dawn and quietly watch me. With his eyes, he would say, "I'm here to make sure you don't get hurt." Every morning before going to classes, I would go for a walk with him. At first, he was a calm dog, but over time he must have sensed my energy and became more active. Spending time with him was good for my soul. When I returned home, the way he greeted me with a wagging tail made me forget all the tiredness of the day. Over time, Dobe became not just a pet, but my best friend. I told him everything about my father's oppression, about my betrayal of Maya, about how inadequate I felt. I wasn't sure if he could understand me, but he always listened quietly, without taking his eyes off me. One day when I came back from school, I was feeling very bad. I had made a mistake in a presentation, and I thought everyone was judging me. As soon as I opened the door, Dobe appeared next to me and leaned his big head against my leg. I hugged Dobe tightly, leaned my head against his furry neck and sobbed, and he stayed still. His silence was like the world's greatest support for me. I was just starting to come to my senses when Dobe broke his silence. Suddenly, I felt a hard stick in my hand. At first, I was uncomfortable, but then I watched in shock. At first, Dobe didn't know exactly what to do. But as the days went by, I felt I needed it, so I taught him. At first, he couldn't do it, but as time went on, he was able to do it more easily and for longer periods of time. We did it with him, and that's when I made one of my mistakes. It was one afternoon on the university campus. I was eating alone, and the voices of the people around me sounded like a hum. I felt like a stranger in the crowd. Just as I was finishing my sandwich, someone approached my table. "Hello, is this seat taken?" he asked with a warm smile. He was a tall, handsome man with light brown hair. I hesitated for a moment, but I thought I needed to socialize and nodded. "Sure, you can sit down," I said in a low voice. He sat down at the table and sipped his coffee slowly. "I'm Tom," he said, holding out his hand. "Hanai," I said briefly in a tone that did not match his warmth. But Tom's energy was so warm that we soon started talking. He told me about his family, what he was studying, how much he enjoyed traveling. At first, I was content with short answers, but his relaxed demeanor opened me up. "What about you? Can't you tell me about yourself?" he asked. "I'm a very ordinary person," I said, shrugging my shoulders. His eyes narrowed and he smiled. "I think ordinariness is an illusion. Everyone has a story, and I would love to hear yours." This sentence touched my heart. It was like someone really wanted to get to know me for the first time. That day, we sat in the middle of the campus and talked for hours. And when he left, he took my number. My relationship with Tom blossomed over time, but it wasn't rushed at all. The day I met him in the canteen was a turning point in my life, but I didn't realize it at the time. Tom was someone who touched my life gently and wanted to get to know me more and more every day. At first, our conversations were casual. We talked about university classes and daily life, but over time I realized that there was a hidden warmth in his every word, patience in his every look. Every conversation with him reminded me to open myself up more. Tom became the definition of trust for me. One day when I sprained my ankle outside, it felt like destiny when he appeared by my side in his car. "Is everything okay?" he asked as he picked me up and carried me to his car. I felt so safe in Tom's arms, a feeling I had never experienced before. I felt I had found the man of my life. The next day, when he came to visit me at home, it was the first time I had spent so much time alone with him. As we watched movies together, I felt that something was beginning to change. Sometimes we had romantic moments. It was the first time I felt that someone cared about me so much and really listened to me. But Dobe was not happy about it and was very angry with Tom. My love was no longer just for him, and this fact upset him. Over time, Tom became everything to me. Every moment I spent with him healed the wounds of my past, but the shadows of the past always haunted me, and sometimes I wanted to run away from Tom, but he always waited patiently. The engagement surprise Tom prepared for me was one of the most special moments of my life. It was the middle of winter, and it was snowing lightly. Tom drove me to a mountain, but I didn't know why. I could feel his excitement as we talked in the car on the way, but at the same time, I didn't expect him to prepare something so special. When we reached the mountain, it was white. Snowflakes were falling from the sky, and everything looked mesmerizing. He smiled at me and told me to be patient a little longer. Then he took me by the hand and led me through the snow. Just as we reached the top of the mountain, I suddenly saw an area in front of me decorated with small lights. There were candles arranged in the shape of hearts, and light music was playing in the background. At that moment, my eyes filled with tears. I began to realize what was going to happen. Tom got down on his knees and reached into his pocket. "Hanai," he said, his voice as soft and sincere as ever. "Everything has made more sense since you came into my life. You are my most beautiful story. Will you spend a lifetime with me?" I was mesmerized by his words. I couldn't hold back my tears. "Yes," I said without hesitation. At that moment, all the pain I had experienced in the past was erased for a moment, and there was only that moment. I was crying with happiness, and he was holding me tightly. That night, we danced in the snow. The warmth I felt in Tom's arms was something I had been searching for all my life. At that moment, I felt everything falling into place. After the engagement, we had a small celebration with family and friends. Even Maya was there. Even though we didn't have the same ties anymore, it warmed my heart to have her by my side on such a special day. Our wedding was held in the first days of spring in a country garden where the flowers were just starting to bloom. The weather that day was sunny but cool. When I got up early in the morning and started the preparations, I was a little nervous, but this nervousness was due to excitement. Everything as I had imagined. Sitting in front of the mirror in the midst of the preparations for the wedding, I had never felt more beautiful. The veil lay elegantly over my hair. The white dress seemed to be sewn on me. But most importantly, for the first time, there was real happiness in my eyes. When I entered the wedding venue, I saw Tom in a tuxedo for the first time. His eyes were directly on me, and I could see that he was as excited as I was. Tom's voice was shaking as we said our vows during the ceremony. "You are everything to me, Hanai," he said. "For better or for worse, I will be with you forever." And as I took my vows, I said in a shaky voice, "Tom, you brought me back to life. You are my hope, and I will love you with everything I have forever." At that moment, everyone applauded, but I was just looking into Tom's eyes. It was as if the world was just the two of us. He was the love of my life. When we hit the dance floor after the wedding, the pressure was completely off. As I danced in Tom's arms, I realized that all the pain of my childhood was just a memory. For the first time in my life, I was completely at peace. After the wedding, we started a new life. Even Dobe had adapted to us. Now Tom, me, and Dobe were a small family. I knew I would always remember these happy moments. Now Dobe's traces are all over the house. His fur spilled on the carpet, his toys scattered in the rooms. But for me, these marks represent a way out of my darkest moments. Dobe did not become my burden. He became a companion who shared my burden and healed my soul. I realized that some things went wrong, but life goes on, and we cannot change the past. It took a while for Dobe to adjust, but he has gotten used to Tom, and Tom loves him very much. We see him as our child, and we are happy together.